I'm Kara Spivey. I'm a research coordinator at Carilion Clinic, but I only serve Virginia Tech Carilion School of Medicine, working with our medical students on what we call a primary project that they have to complete for graduation. And so what that means is about half of a class of medical students will do basic science research, and the other half will come over here at Carilion and do human subjects clinical research. And so by the nature of my job, I have become sort of an expert in investigator initiated studies developed at Carilion with minimal funding. And so my portion of the talk is going to explore the process and the actual how to submit, but I also wanted to focus on kind of the planning and prep work that I think needs to go in order for the process to be as smooth as possible overall. And so you'll see this slide again towards the middle of the presentation, but I use acronyms. And so R&D, I'm referring to our research and development department. IRB is our institutional review board. And then HART is our health analytics research team that you'll hear from Maddie, the director, today as well. So first, in order for an investigator-initiated project to be successful, I think that there's a level of planning that the research team can put together before actually starting typing out all of your applications. And so if you're lucky enough to work with one of our VTC students, something from the school perspective that we require for them for a grade is what we call a prospectus. A prospectus is a pretty detailed document that outlines their background literature, their methods, how they're going to work on this project for 4 years. I'm not saying all of you should draft a prospectus, but I am saying that there are elements of that that help with the actual submission process. So if you're planning on doing a research study, so not quality improvement, quality assurance, you're trying to contribute to generalizable knowledge, you should start with a thorough literature review. Your IRB application will ask for references. And overall, you should look for your gap in knowledge, your overarching research question, develop your hypothesis and your specific aims, because that's what's going to shape your methods and the protocol that you get approved. And so you should also consult with someone who's an expert in statistics. I know at Carilion, we have resources through the health analytics research team. But again, if you're working with a medical student, one of our requirements from a school perspective is that the student actually is able to talk about the stats, explain how, like, the methods. And so we have co-statistics mentors at the Center for Biostatistics and Health Data Sciences. And so consulting that way, if we have them looped in on the team, the students aren't going to break those, like the math laws that are kind of outside of my scope. But no matter what, if you're doing a prospective enrolling study, you need to know your end value up front, whether you're doing a proof of concept or pilot study. Consulting with stats from the get-go is important because, again, it's something that you'll have to mention in your IRB application. More helpful tips for a prospective study, especially if we have minimal funding, is being able to speak to what is standard of care for your cohort. So when are your patients presenting to clinic for initial evaluation or follow-up? Being able to talk about what standard of care in an investigator-initiated study is something that the R&D department is going to ask you to do, as well as your IRB application. So there's a very explicit question in both applications about what is being done for research purposes and what is standard of care. And anything that's occurring for research purposes only cannot be billed to insurance. And so that is going to help you look for gaps. Do you actually need to pursue funding in order for this project to be feasible? I have a bullet for creative design. So one of the hallmarks of Virginia Tech Carilion is the health system science implementation perspective. And we have many investigators, again, as someone who's lucky enough to work across departments. We have many physician scientists who develop protocols that actually have minimal face-to-face impact with our patients. So, for example, in our family medicine department, researchers with Dr. Epling and Dr. Michelle Rockwell have investigations that are prospective and randomized, but we're not actually calling or interacting with our participants in that way. Another example in our OBGYN department, I've worked with Dr. Armbruster. We did remote focus groups, which were great. So being creative and thinking about the participant perspective and what it actually takes to participate is key. And then we all know that a randomized control trial is the gold standard for an experimental design, but those do typically require extra time, money, and staff. So staff is one of the big key parts of a research study, being able to not only enroll patients, but complete all of the data collection we need. And so some departments might be willing to let your clinical staff, like a nurse or a medical assistant, an athletic trainer, participate in research, but you need to have departmental approval for that. You can't no one ever wants to overburden their clinic staff, and especially if our clinic staff is starting to do tasks outside of their normal job roles for research purposes, they'll have to take city training. Training takes some time. More helpful hints for recruitment is to always think about consenting and the paperwork that you'll need to be responsible for throughout the life of your project. So in your IRB application, you're going to outline your process as well as where your documents are stored. And so as someone who works across all of the departments, I could not recommend using REDCap and eConsent more. I joke a lot that that's the reason why I can sleep at night, not stress out about consent forms going missing. E-consent can take place in a traditional remote format where the researcher and the participant are in two different locations. But we've also worked with our HEART team to use e-consent for document storage, and you're consenting face-to-face in a traditional way that you would think. We also, another thing that I like when I'm working with a student to develop a prospective study is a multifaceted recruitment approach. So if you're able to use one of the IRB templates to develop a phone script, making phone calls works. If you're wanting to approach in person, that works as well. You can write both approach and recruitment methods into your IRB application up front so that your team has some flexibility. But again, that takes a lot of planning and thinking up front about when our patients are coming in, who is going to be responsible for this task. And as we all know, you can't make changes to your recruitment process unless you do an amendment when your project's approved. So if you, in your initial submission, if you try to be cover all of your bases up front, your team is going to have, more success getting started. And then there very well could be a way that you're distributing a survey, working with our HEART team, using email addresses that are in Epic until the institution's at the point where we're using MyChart for recruitment. And I know there's been a lot of different talks about that sort of thing as well. So data collection tips for a prospective study. I've already mentioned this once, but what are your participants' responsibilities? If your participants have to present to the clinic multiple times in order for data collection to occur in person, that may become burdensome and lead to high attrition rates. Because remember, I'm thinking from the point of view that we don't have funding to pay for travel incentives and things like that. So when you're designing your research intervention, try to keep the participant experience at the forefront. Do they have to come to multiple visits in 1 week? That's going to be hard with work schedules for them to balance. If you're collecting data at post-op appointments that are scheduled, do they have to come for a full year of post-op visits, or are all of our outcome measures going to be finished at 6 months? What if they have to go to multiple locations? They have to present to our ION building and then go to a Quest lab. Like those extra pieces that make navigating the protocol hard from a participant point of view, if you can simplify those in an investigator-initiated study, you'll see that you're not only are you all pleased with your data collection, but your participants will probably want to participate in future research studies. I'm not a good coordinator if I don't keep mentioning regulatory documents. So if you're doing survey-based study and it's a longitudinal study and you want to use paper, please remember that you have to keep track of all of those paper documents, our source documents. And so if your team can use REDCap for survey distribution, it's wonderful. You can automate invitations, you can schedule reminders, you can make it so that your team members receive emails if a survey is completed, so that then they know to go and distribute payment if that's part of your protocol. We have a lot of tools that we can use here at Carilion to really make clinical research simple, but also protect us from a regulatory standpoint as well. Our students do sometimes occasionally work on retrospective studies. And so in working with Maddie and Maddie's team, this is kind of my big go-to advice. If your project's relying heavily on Epic, make sure that that information is actually recorded. Consult in advance with the heart team about what can be extracted and what might need to be done with manual chart review. And I know I mentioned it, I had a data collection tool on the previous slide, but a data collection tool, you're going to list out exactly what variables you need to collect from the medical record, that you cannot collect more in your REDCap if it's not IRB approved. And so one of the things, like leaning back into a well-designed REDCap, is think about if you need radio buttons or one answer only, or if you need to build a select all that apply list. You want to try to avoid as many text boxes in your REDCap just to help you out with for analysis purposes. So I cannot recommend more consulting with literature, looking at what type of measures you need to actually pull from the chart. And again, remember the statistical analysis piece of it all as well.
And Kara, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. No,
yeah.
But there was a timely question in the chat about REDCap access for folks at Virginia Tech as well. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so at Carilion Clinic, you'll work with our heart team after your project is approved to get REDCap access to a Carilion REDCap. I know at Virginia Tech, researchers on that side actually build their own REDCaps and test and do that part on their own. At Carilion, I think REDCap access doesn't come until after the project is approved. And our Virginia Tech researchers will also fill out what we call an ACA agreement. We do that electronically, where you'll provide a copy of your ID and sign off on the access and confidentiality agreement. Any other REDCap for Virginia Tech researchers can have access to a Carilion Clinic REDCap, but that has to be outlined in your IRB application that you're having access to identifiable information. And again, you'll get a new login that's different than what you're using on the Virginia Tech REDCap side. Anything else? Okay. So one of the really important tools that we have at Carilion that's very helpful is TriNetX. This is one of the points where we emphasize for our students to begin to give you insight on your population. Our heart team has this linked on their website. There are trainings that are offered monthly. And this is really going to let you know about how many people within, a year or two are presenting with your disease of interest. And again, if you're doing a retrospective based study, this is actually where the heart team starts your patient cohort data pull after you have your IRB approval. Okay, so let's say you've completed all the planning, you and your team have been collaborating together, and it's time to actually begin the paperwork. My advice, please give your team members at least a month's notice to check their city training. Our physicians do not have tons of extra time. So if your team knows that you want to submit an IRB application by October 1st, give them at least a month to log into City, make sure they're up to date and that their training won't expire. And this is a really key point here too. Carilion employees must take Carilion City training, whereas Virginia Tech researchers, whether it's a Virginia Tech medical student, a Virginia Tech main campus student, an FBRI PI, Virginia Tech people take Virginia Tech City training. And we're never going to see the Virginia Tech City training loaded into a Carilion Clinic based PRISM system. So communicate well in advance with your team about completing city training, because if you submit your application and city training is not complete, your application is not going to get reviewed. And also remember, any person who's doing research specific procedures for recruitment, consenting, data collection has to have city training on file. And so here we are into the good stuff. How do you actually get a protocol approved at Carilion? We have a multi-step process. And again, I'm going to speak to a collaboration just between Carilion and Virginia Tech. I know that we have branches that go to places like Duke and across the country to VCU, and all of the IRB relationships and the institutional relationships, once you go beyond just Carilion and Virginia Tech, or they're a little bit more complicated for me to talk to in a very short amount of time. So I'm speaking specifically to a Carilion research mentor working with a Virginia Tech student or Virginia Tech lab. So you're probably wondering, why do we have to submit so many applications? Well, our IRB team is responsible for protecting the rights and welfare of human subjects research participants, and our R&D department is responsible for looking at the operational aspects of the actual research project. So again, both departments are very interested in what is standard of care for your patients. What are they already receiving as a part of their treatment at Carilion? Your R&D application is going to be submitted through an R&D enabled survey. This is going to get manually routed by one of my coworkers, Melissa Mercure, in the R&D department. It will get signed off by the Carilion department chair. And then the R&D approval letter should come back to you within around 5 business days, depending upon when signatures are received. I have a couple of names of more R&D admin that help with this approval process. It might get routed to a couple of different people. Your R&D application may trigger a feasibility meeting. An R&D feasibility meeting is going to occur for a prospective trial that's probably using lots of different departments or resources. You most likely won't have a feasibility meeting for something like a retrospective study or a qualitative interview or a focus group type study, just for the ones that are more complicated in design. So the bullet in bold here: the IRB team is not going to approve your project unless you have your R&D letter attached to your submission. So you have to include it. You cannot submit without it, but you can work in Prism on your application. You just can't submit it. And a lot of people talk about IRB applications. Yes, they are long. That's fine. But you also need to think about your supplemental documents. Our IRB has lots of templates available that you can use. I provided a link. My key thing here is just remember that anything that is considered patient facing has to have an IRB approval stamp in order to be used. So that means if you make edits to the document after it's approved, you have to submit an amendment and update the version date. So the key here is work with your team to proofread and agree on final formatting before you put anything into your initial review packet into Prism. So Prism, as you keep hearing me reference, is our IRB submission system. If you work for Carilion, you use the Carilion Clinic Active Directory, you'll get an account set up through the IRB staff. So I'm not here to speak about levels of IRB review, exempt, expedited, full board. What I kind of want to briefly touch on is, if you think your study may be a full board review study, please consult the IRB website about their pre-submission deadlines so that you can have an idea of when to submit your initial submission packet and what IRB meeting it could be reviewed at. And the go-to advice that I tell my students and the teams that I work on is that after we hit submit on that IRB application, we should be on call. We should be monitoring our emails, because the sooner we send back stipulations to our IRB team, the sooner we're going to be able to have our project approved. And speaking of emails, your IRB application gets routed to our privacy team as well. So this is where the Virginia Tech students and the Virginia Tech personnel are going to get personalized emails from the Virginia Tech IRB. So the key here is, after you hit submit, you're not finished. Just monitor that email and make sure that you're replying in a timely manner, because that's how the process is going to keep moving in the background. Okay, so you receive IRB approval and you're like, here we go, let's start consenting. You don't get to start immediately. First, you need to look and see if you need to apply for a certificate of confidentiality or register on clinicaltrials.gov. That's going to be noted in your IRB approval letter. And our two institutions have to agree to the terms. So a work order agreement is a common phrase that you'll see. This is another thing that's executed on behalf of R&D. Melissa Mercure, this work order agreement process between Carilion and Virginia Tech really is seamless. Over the last couple of years, this has become a relatively quick turnaround. And so after the work order agreement is received back, that's when your HEART team is going to start giving a Virginia Tech student access to REDCap or a shared drive. And overall, investigators do not sign contracts on behalf of the institution. So be in contact with R&D, especially if you are working beyond just a partnership with Virginia Tech. The sooner you can loop in R&D on those logistical issues, the better this process will go for you. And then I think the ending here that I want you all to take away is, from a coordinator perspective, one of the most challenging areas in clinical research revolves around the level of documentation that's required. Clinical care and research processes are not always equal, and you should account for that when you're designing your protocol. So just like in basic science research, if you don't document it, it didn't happen. So an example of documentation that is oftentimes overlooked is documenting the informed consent process. And I don't mean collecting a signature and giving someone a copy of the form. I mean actually inserting a research note in Epic or drafting up a paper form that you store with your research binder that outlines that we reviewed the form in totality and we answered questions and they received a copy and we did teach back questions. And most importantly, when I'm training medical students, that I emphasize to them is researchers cannot date an informed consent form for the participant. The participant has to date the form themselves. Another big key thing, read your IRB approval letter. Not only does it tell you about certificate of confidentiality through the NIH or clinicaltrials.gov, it's also going to tell you about your check-in process. Do you have a continuing review? Do you have an annual review? Those are regulatory things that have to be accounted for. And then again, something that I emphasize with my students is the expectation of being a protocol expert. Your team just spent all of this time developing your protocol. You also need to document that you have read and have been trained on the protocol. And then moving forward, your whole study team should be aware of when we need to submit an amendment, if we need to alter the protocol. So my go-to advice is be a protocol expert and communicate within your research team. If you do those two things really well, you're going to prevent protocol deviations. And I'm going to leave it to Maddie to talk more about HEART and data and all of the different things that Carilion can help with here too. And yeah, so I hope I'm available if you have any questions about investigator-initiated type things. I like this type of topic. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Kara. And before I pass things over to Maddie, there's some questions in the chat. One being about the city training and creating affiliations within city to transfer completed courses between like Carilion and Virginia Tech, Carilion School of Medicine.
All right. So my understanding, I'm sure there's probably IRB people I can't see, but when you take a Carilion City course, Carilion has its own specific modules that we require our investigators to take. Virginia Tech has their own modules that they're required to take as well. A lot of times, if you've done city training at another institution, when you affiliate with your new institution in the city program, only those new modules will populate. But the two IRBs have worked out kind of a reliance process of, if a Virginia Tech person takes Virginia Tech City and the Virginia Tech IRB verifies that it's up to date, then the Carilion IRB will review the protocol and their training. Did I answer the question? Maybe.
Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Farrell.
Yeah, just if you have it, it's within the last 3 years at another institution, you just affiliate with your respective institution and it'll carry over. So there's nothing special about Carilion's modules or Virginia Tech's modules. They're city.
That's right, Francis. They're the same modules. It's just a matter of whether they correlate in terms of which modules have been reviewed.
Yeah, I think I'm one of the ones that posted something in the chat about this, and I think to me the key phrase is that says you can affiliate, and this is from the university perspective, you can affiliate with Virginia Tech through the city account to transfer completed courses without retaking them. It's been my understanding
yeah.
if you did one module, then both organizations would recognize it and you wouldn't have to do two separate modules.
Correct.
But sometimes the people haven't taken them at all yet. And so that's what takes the most amount of time,
Right.
and that you need
Right.
to give people a heads up about that for. And
Yep.
one thing that's a challenge with our students or people who have worked at other, especially from the Virginia Tech perspective, I've had students who use their previous email for their main email that they're affiliated with, and it'll go to like a George Mason email, but if you change, the Virginia Tech students have to change their email address in the city training program to receive emails from the VTIRB.
One more quick question, Kara. Do we need R&D letters for retrospective studies using Trinetics as part of the IRB application?
Yes.
That was easy. All right. I think I can pass things on now, Maddie. Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. Good questions. Okay. Presentation mode. I'm trying to find that. Here it is. Are you seeing it now?
We see the slides, but not in presentation mode.
I think it's coming up. There we go.
Now we do.
Okay. Thank you, Kara, for that. I am going to have a tough act to follow all that great information that Kara gave. So I am Maddie Tenter with the Health Analytics Research Team. My team supports things like biostatistics and data. Today, I want to review with you actually a product that we put out called My Project Path that helps you determine what type of resources you need for your particular project, lets you follow your own path and get the information that you need specific to your project and your path. And a lot of actually of what Kara covered is included in My Project Path, so it'll give you a lot of the links that she provided and some more information on them. The nice thing about My Project Path is that it lets you look at things off hours whenever you've got time to do your research. There's self-service resources. And there's constantly links back to how you can get help from other people, live help too. So we have office hours, we've got email addresses in there, people's names to contact. My team, which is HEART, supports this, but actually the information in My Project Path is from all over the research spectrum at Carilion. So it's got research and development has contributed, the IRB, Human Research Protections Office, iThrive, research compliance, a lot of different people have. Don't get thrown off by the fact that it says 31 slides. We're actually not going to go through 31 slides. We're actually going to hopefully just use this one slide here, slide number 3. The other ones are just backup if something goes wrong. So then I can navigate through some screen shares of each of these things if the links don't work. So what you can say is that when you get into My Project Path, and this is the link here, you basically get all of these different topics that you can explore. And so you can just pop among the topics. The ones that are asterisks are sort of the ones we'll pop in today that Kara did cover a lot of, just to show you where those links are and everything. But we can also, if there's time, pop into any others that are of interest to you too. So for example, if we view the topic around the approvals, I'm hoping did that show up for you all, the window? Okay, good, because it's now shown up on a different screen for me. So if you can see the approval window, you can see that right here, we have the research application link. We've got the IRB link as well. And then there's some information about if you've got external collaborators and if you have key stakeholders, you'll need to have some additional steps to get their approvals as well. I'm hoping if I close that, I go back to my slide. And then we've got information about the IRB. So this is what the IRB has provided to us, some information, and they've got FAQs here. This is really helpful. Meredith put this together. So you can actually watch a short video to learn how to log into PRISM and how to use it. And then there's all kinds of questions about how do you get consent and everything like that as well. So very helpful resource there that they've put together. I keep looking over here because my bigger screen is there, which is where my screens are popping up. So there's also just more information about, like, say, the HERPO, and you can meet who the team members are if you've been working with somebody. This one I won't go into the statistical analysis and training videos, but my team curates some videos if you actually want to do some statistics yourself or you're interested in how to do that. This is a growing area, so we are continually putting new topics out there, new training videos out there. You can also, if you've been working with one of our team members, I have 19 people on our team. If you can't remember who you work with, you can actually click on this and meet the team members and find the person that you've worked with, get to know them a little bit better. Somebody earlier was mentioning about the library and literature searches. We did put together at one point a presentation around literature searches. There's a good PowerPoint presentation that one of my team members created here, and also a template that you can use to kind of organize your thoughts around the literature search. So that's a resource that you can open and save on your own and explore. Trinetics, one of my favorite topics here. And let's see if we open this one up. Okay, so this is a really great link to go to. It actually has the Carilion Clinic Trinetics user agreement. You can read through the agreement as a PDF form, but you can actually get to the user agreement electronically. My team is working really hard to get all of our processes electronic, so we're not passing around PDFs and paper and everything like that. So if you go to the Trinetics user agreement, you can fill it out, you route it to whomever your section chief is or your chair, your department head. They'll sign off on it, and then it comes over to me just to check to make sure that it was signed off appropriately. And then from there, it goes over to be assigned to basically be set up. The VTC medical school students, they actually route through Dr. Leslie LeConte. So you can go in here. The nice thing about Trinetics, we also give you some language here that you can put into your protocol. So you can copy paste this so that you don't have to kind of reinvent language into your protocol. So if you're using it, a feasibility query through Trinetics yielded this number of patients during this time period. If you want to re-identify it, you can use this additional language here about re-identifying those patients if you need additional data points out of Epic for it. So hopefully this will be really helpful. Another nice thing about Trinetics is that it actually has an analytics package to it as well. We have multiple, I think psychiatry has like 6 or 7 publications that were done completely out of Trinetics, the retrospective data. It involved no additional data out of Epic or anything else. We do want to have a sign off that's been approved. So we still go through R&D and a quick exemption determination letter through the IRB. That is what allows us to use that information through Trinetics and do publications directly from there. So they've got some statistical tools actually built into the program. And as I said, we've actually, Carillion's had multiple publications, but you can also go to like trinetics.com, and they've got a list of publications by a lot of organizations, not just Carilion, that have been done out of basically the real world data, not just Carilion data, but also there's international data, 180 million patients in that. There's a US collaborative, I think that's 60 or 80 million patients in there. So there's a lot of other networks that you can explore as well with that data. So then we have, let's see now, the getting help with study design here. My next one. And this one I think has a link also to reaching out to the health analytics research team if you need our help. My team has expertise in project design and statistics. They're certified in pulling data out of Epic, so they can kind of help you from the beginning to the end of it. We're expert biostatisticians. They all work in REDCap. So we've worked towards this arrangement with their research data engineer biostatisticians. So they can kind of be one-stop shopping for you on your project. They can advise you from the beginning of the design all the way up to helping you, as Kara was talking about, like what data are available. Is it really collected in Epic the right way? They can then actually get that data pulled for you when the time comes. They can help you with the stat plan with the full knowledge of what data actually are available. They can help set up REDCap, import the data that's available, but also set up fields for any chart review that might need to happen, set up surveys for you if you're collecting other data points directly from patients or participants, or we've sometimes even have employees as the subjects here. So they can set all of that up and then ultimately pull all that data together for you. And also they have already had city training, so you don't have to worry about them getting their city training. They're approved to have access to all of the different environments, so you don't actually have to include them on your protocol at all. that this is part of their job to provide this support. So they don't need to be included on your protocol, and you don't need any additional agreements to have them in place as well. So definitely reach out to us, and the email is there if you need that. I'm going to touch briefly on this one, which is cost estimates. So you may or may not be looking at having funding for your project. Sometimes it's good to go through a cost estimate anyway, just to sort of see what type of resources would be needed by Carilion. If you're looking at, if you kind of go through here and say, well, it's going to take 5 years to do this. It's a huge data extract, and this is kind of like uses kind of t-shirt sizes, not really specific. That like REDCap, are you going to have a really complicated tool? Are you going to have complicated surveys? Are you going to use our secure research environment, which we'll talk a little bit more about later? What type of statistical support do you need? And it's just sort of an estimate. Will there be build required in Epic? Kara touched on that before, especially if there's anything that's going to be billed for. And then if there are any additional costs, and these additional costs might involve research coordinator time that you need to account for, or it might include participant reimbursements that you might need to account for. And if you basically fill this out at the very bottom, it basically comes up with a total for you. So it's not going to be perfect because it's based on estimates, but it gives you an idea of how big your project is, what you might want to consider for any type of resources, or even if you're not seeking any type of funding, you'll know what kind of like the burden is that might be put on Carilion. You can weigh that against the value of your project, which definitely might be worth it, but it's something for you to think about, like how much value versus how much something might cost to do. So that is an available resource for you if you're looking for that. Oops. Hang on a second. There we go. Okay. All right, the next one is just a short one on working with external collaborators. This is, as Kara was commenting on, we need the access confidentiality agreement and some other paperwork from them. There is also a background process that is done for students. The background process is already done by, say, Virginia Tech when they employ their people, as this example. So we don't redo a background check. There also is onboarding of students that are involved through the Visiting Student Affairs. The VTC SOM students have a sort of a different path. It's through Visiting Student Affairs, but it's sort of such a well-worn path. It's done all at once because all of those students are working with Carilion, versus if we have students being added on to projects sort of one by one or not part of a program like VTC SOM, there's a process through the Visiting Student Affairs Department to onboard those students appropriately. So this gives some information about that as well. I would like to note that all of the requirements that we have our external people go through, they're not different for external people. It's just all of the Carilion employees did it at a different time. Our background checks were when we were hired. The access confidentiality agreement is something we actually sign as part of our annual in-services. We've already given our copies of driver's licenses, et cetera. We have to have our flu shots, our TB tests, everything like that as well. So it's not a different or an additional requirement. The timing is different. So I want everyone to know we're not picking on our collaborators, but we are required to do that, including OIG exclusion screenings as well, which our compliance group runs those. Those are done on every single Carilion employee. They also have to be done on anybody who's external, who has access to our data or our resources or our systems. Next one is data sources, which typically involves Epic extracts. Kara was really spot on about knowing what data you have, being very aware of whether or not it's available. I've been with Carilion 26 years. We have not had Epic for 26 years. So you have to think about, how far back are you going? And we haven't even had all of Epic since 2008, which is when we first brought up Epic. So Epic improved over time. We got more facilities, we got more modules. And that's where this is addressing here about these Epic applications and modules. You have to think about how far back can you go. Say if you want cardiology, you're not going to get the same data if you go back prior to the cardiology module being implemented here at Carilion. So being aware of that. We also don't have the laboratory module of Epic, and we interface with Quest, which is our lab system. So that changes a little bit about how we get our data. It makes it a little bit more difficult because we're working with an external vendor. There is a presentation here called Data Management Overview. So if you want to learn more about data sources, actually beyond Epic as well, but also some of the constraints of using Epic data, I recommend that you go and look at that PowerPoint presentation. It is my intent to at some point actually record that and put that out here, so you don't have to just pull up a PowerPoint and flip through the slides. You can actually watch a recording, but I just haven't gotten to that yet. Okay, so let's see. This is the next one is biostatistics support through our health analytics research team. As we noted, we are career biostatisticians. I've had people working with me for over 20 years, master's, PhD. We even have an MD on board. They have full access to all of the data. They're certified by Epic, and these are Corellian employees, and it's just more information there. So, and at the bottom here is our email. So if you want to get in touch with us, we actually have this monitored by multiple people, so we can get right back in touch. We also have office hours that we can provide you. Just drop in office hours if you have time and you've got a question or want to discuss a upcoming project with us. Okay. Not sure I have to review too much about REDCap because Kara did such a wonderful job selling REDCap. But if you're not convinced that REDCap is the best thing ever, you should go to this REDCap overview PowerPoint presentation, and then you will realize just how fantastic REDCap is for all needs. Our REDCap is secure. It is stored behind our firewall. We maintain absolute security around it. It is pretty much as secure as Epic is. So that shows you the security around it. Everything is logged. And that allows us to have full PHI in there, including sensitive information. Security is very granular. As we noted, Virginia Tech people, a lot of Virginia Tech people have access to our REDCap, including not VTC SOM students. And we also have people from Duke and UVA and other institutions, University of Kentucky, that have access. We actually have we've been the center site for multi-institution projects as well, where other institutions are entering their data into us. We're the central site for it, and we are set up to do that. Again, we don't want you to have to reinvent the wheel with language. So we have language here that you can copy and paste into your IRB protocol. This is nice because then IRB knows that you've been working with us and that you're going to be using Corellian's REDCap for your project. So use that into your protocol so you don't have to kind of write stuff up like that. One question that comes up is about getting Epic access. This is when you may need to do chart review because maybe some of the data that you need is in images or procedure notes or something that you really need, or history and physicals or discharge summaries, and you really need to kind of read through it. So basically, if you are doing research and you need to do chart review, you will get what's called a context in Epic for chart review for research. And it is read only, and it's for chart review. Research coordinators like Kara have a additional access, which is write access for enrolling and documenting in Epic. And that's important because they're putting in research notes and everything. Some Virginia Tech Corellian School of Medicine students act as research coordinators, and the Research and Development Office is responsible for that training of them. So of anyone who's getting that level of access. So that belongs to the research coordinators and the people that they have trained. And if you have questions, I refer you back to R&D and also to Kara, who know a lot about that. And then standard Epic access is the stuff that you're doing for your regular job if you're a Corellian employee. And that access should be used for QA/QI projects as well, because for QA/QI data, it should be data that is part of your everyday job that you already have access to. And you should make sure that you always use this correct context. If we get audited and a patient wants to know who's looked at their chart and why, when you're using the research context, then when that information is released, it's known that you were doing that underneath a IRB approved protocol and that it was allowed. So please make sure you use your correct context. And my team gets this set up for you after your IRB protocol is approved. We're notified of that and we work on getting you the proper access. I'm not going to go into the clinical trial support. That's a bit outside of what I'm going to cover today. I'm also not going to go into case studies, but we do get a lot of questions about this. So compliance and the IRB put some great information together about how do you do a case study and what documents do you need to fill out for that. So please go there to find those documents. I do want to get to the data storage and analysis through Spark. Spark is our secure research environment. Here at Corellian, it is cloud-based. So that means that you can access it from everywhere. The intent was to make sure that our data got put into a place where you could then leverage different types of analytic tools. And we have things like Python and R, but we also have SAS. We have NVivo for qualitative data analysis. We have ArcGIS for spatial, geospatial data analysis. We're working on getting an imaging, well, we do have one imaging slice, 3D slicers in there for imaging analysis. We're working on getting another one. We're working on a genomic software. So this is basically where we have vast, pretty much unlimited storage for whatever file sizes are going in there. And then we can also spin up the appropriate environment for the tool. So obviously, if it's a small data set, you know, and you're just doing some R or something on it, then you may not need more than sort of a standard setup in our secure research environment. But if it is our really big, you know, files and very complex analysis, we can actually spin up machine learning level type resources back behind it to support it. Again, we don't want you to reinvent language, so we've given you a nice little blurb here that you can put into your IRB protocol if you'll be using our secure research environment. And also, I would note at the very bottom here, if I scroll down a little bit, your project eventually will end, and you will close it out with the IRB. I know it's hard to think about that when you're just getting started, but you need to think in your IRB protocol, where does that data go after you close your protocol? There are requirements for how long you keep data, but you're not allowed to actually keep access to identify data, but it still needs to be retained for a certain period of time, which is all going to be stipulated in your protocol. So we have a new process now that we basically, by default, we are going to zip up your data and store it in a cold storage inside of Spark. So that both complies with retention for the period of time. We've had projects where the investigators aren't even with Corellium anymore. All that data will still be stored for the proper amount of time, and then it will be deleted at the proper time. If there's ever need for that data to be, you know, brought back, then certain, you know, approvals would need to be gone, but we can actually recover that data as well. That's what the whole point of cold storage is not easily accessible, but it is there and it will be removed when the time comes. So, you know, also use that information in your protocol for the appropriate storage of your data as well. And that goes into also this project closure. And now there's requirements with NIH that if you are getting NIH funding, you need to have an NIH data management and sharing policy document. There's all sorts of different resources here that our compliance department put together that you can access to get to basically a template for how to store it, where you can store it, language that you can use for all of that as well, and requirements. So please, you know, explore that as well. It's good to have, even if you don't have NIH funding, it's a good thing to look through about how that will be done. I think that covers, you know, there's some other links here I'll just step through, but then we can pause. And if anybody wants me to open any of these or further discuss, we can. Wet lab support, that's underneath research and development. This gives contact information. Innovation department, intellectual property, contact information there also for that department. The SIM Center does a lot of research. There's contact information as well with them. iThrive is part of the CTSA grant that we do with Virginia Tech and UVA. And there's a lot of resources, so you can actually view that topic that will link you over to additional resources. Maybe there's a special microscope that we don't have here at Corellium, but they have it at UVA. You might be able to find that and who to collaborate with through this iThrive portal that you can log into using your UVA or your Virginia Tech credentials. Or Corellium credentials. Whatever your institution is, you can use those credentials to get in. A couple other things, we do have links to presentation and manuscript development. There's some training in there, and also down here there's poster templates and such. You do have to be logged into Corellium to get to the poster templates, because that's put out by our marketing and communication department. We also have some information. We get occasional questions about ERA Commons accounts. So Vera Holland from R&D gave us information to put there, so it's readily accessible to you. And then finally, a little bit on acknowledgement for language for publications and presentations. So if you're using Corellium's REDCap, there's some language we'd like for you to include in that. If you're using Trinetics, there's language Trinetics would like for you to include. So instead of trying to figure out what is that language and having to write something up from scratch, we're trying to give you all of that right here so that you can just go in and borrow it. So I would say that if you have any questions about any of this while you're digging into it, you know, please feel free to reach out. It's Hart, H-A-R-T, at corelliumclinic.org. If you also have any suggestions of topics that are not covered in here that you think ought to be, please also reach out. We would love to expand this. if you yourself have resources that you would like to have included in here. This, as I said, this is not just about my department. This is helping all of our researchers, both with research and QA/QI, navigate the processes here, because we know that it's complicated, and there's, how we just wanted to kind of put it all in one place so you could go to one place, find all the links, get all the information, and that's about it. So any questions? Did anybody want me to go back into any of these or open up something different?
Maddie, thanks. Can you still generate a report of all the activities you've done in this My Project Path? A
So
PDF?
yeah, it's a good question, because we used to have it that way, and I was finding is that nobody was really actually going through it sequentially, that people were kind of going in here. And so I've turned it more into an educational tool instead of something that would compile. The hope is later, when we could, right now, as you know, Francis, we can link over, this is in REDCap, your R&D applications in REDCap, we could link things over if they filled out certain things here to move it over to that. I think I'm not sure how much value it adds on the R&D side, because subsequently you've trimmed down that application to be so small, and efficient, that I don't know whether there would be a lot of value in that. I think that if there were a way for us to do this more about collecting information, also eventually have it be the IRB protocol at the same time. So we are looking at an eventuality of tying this into PRISM. But that's down the road quite a bit. There needs to be some other changes first made about that. So at this time, the short answer is not really to do that summary and to summarize it. It used to be there, but we actually took that out and used this more as sort of an education tool, which is why now it's like a viewing of a topic instead of sort of tracking your project start to finish.
Okay, thank you.
Good question, because it has evolved.
Any other questions for Maddie, or would anyone like to look at any of these other sections that she didn't go into in detail?
No, great. Once you start reviewing it, if you have questions, as I said, please reach out. We'd be happy to answer them and expand it further. We're just always looking to improve.
And I feel like you guys did such a great job at setting like groundwork for our future sessions. Questions about compliance and literature search and working with biostats, all of which are topics coming up in this year's research series sessions. So we hope that you guys will continue to join us and learn more about the research process through the organization. But, I think you guys have done a fabulous job. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. I think that you guys have highlighted so well the importance of communication and planning on the front end, especially with, like Kara talked about with the city training modules and the IRB process as well. And you've shared such great resources, Maddie, to help get people started as they think through the research process here at our organization. As a reminder, in the chat, there's a link to our CME evaluation. So please take a moment and give us feedback for our presenters, and also get CME credit if that's something that you need. And then, like both of our presenters have said, they are happy to for you to reach out for more information. And I think if you want to put your emails in the chat, or we can share them as well for folks to reach out if they have further questions. But thank you guys so much, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you.